Master Trainer from VertiMax. I'm going to be doing the podcast today. I have the pleasure of having Chad Coy on. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I'll give a little background from my knowledge. I've known Chad for a long time. I don't know how many years. I think we're 15 or so years that we've known each other. It's rare that I get a chance to talk to someone who has more experience than I do. He's been training a long time, a lot longer than me. So I want him to give his background, but he's got a pretty extensive background going from college, training, powerlifting, strongman, speed training. He's pretty much done it all. But I want to turn it over to Chad out there in Missouri, and I'll let you give your intro, buddy.
Well, if my phone would hold still,
there you go.
Better off. So basically, I started training in 1980. Like every kid, just wanted to get stronger. I wanted to get stronger because I didn't realize how strength affected speed, but it was huge. So started training in 1980. Played high school football. My dream was to play college football, but I was too small. A lot of people have that same story. So I ended up going to college, and I was the first person in my family to go to college. So in my infinite wisdom at 18, I gave up the opportunity to play at small schools and went to a big school. Went there, decided when I was big enough I would walk on. Didn't realize that this thing called eligibility, once you walk on campus, it starts clicking. By the time I walked on, I was as big and fast and strong as any of the linebackers on campus. The only problem was I was, had 2 semesters of eligibility. So my coach said, unless you're Lawrence Taylor, you're never going to see the field. Why did you do it? So I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach. So he's like, cool, I need assistants. So let's go talk and let's get that set up. So I started coaching as a undergraduate assistant strength coach at Purdue University in 1991 and 1992. Got kicked out in the real world. Didn't get the master's assistantship that I wanted. Went to another guy who was a player there. No begrudges to him. He serves the GM for the Texans for the last 10 years. So pretty good dude. So that was that story. Kicked out in the real world, took a job, but I wanted to get back into, my dream was always to have my own facility. So in 1995, I opened a Powerhouse gym license, but anytime a kid would walk through the door, I would just find a way to train them. So along that time, I played semi-pro football for like 8 years, had a lot of fun with that, tried to get that football out of my system, got into powerlifting, won a couple of drug-free national championships and a world championship. Kind of led me into strongman, and that was 1998. America's Strongest Man was out in Vegas at the racetrack. Went out, did well, turned pro. Kind of never looked back since, and just got into strongman and did fairly well in that. Competed in the Open. I've competed 10 times in the Open and top 10 every time in the Open America's Strongest Man. Then went into the Masters. Ended up winning Masters America's Strongest Man a few times, 3 times. Went to Worlds 5 times, got second twice. But along the way, it was always really about how can I utilize strength training to help develop athletes so that they can attain their dreams. And then that's kind of like how I've met Parisi. So in 2005, I started researching, doing this all myself. And then I found Parisi and just fell in love with the process. And I think that's when I met Steve back in 2006. We were the 13th franchise. And we opened in Kokomo, Indiana back in 2007. Well, we opened in 2006, 2007. 2007 was really that premier. We opened in December of 2006, but I don't really count those 2 weeks. So, and then along the way, just got more and more into training, more and more certifications. I go to education as much as I can. Love listening to other master coaches because you pick something up. As a master coach within the Parisi Speed School franchise, I get the opportunity to travel all around and see different facilities. And I think one of the coolest things is that I learn something new at each and every facility. So I think that's something that I really cherish as part of the master coaching crew at Parisi.
Well, that's great. So, obviously, you guys aren't hearing this, but he's very modest. He's got a lot of accomplishments that I'm going to try to pick at a little bit. So, you started out, I think a lot of coaches probably can relate right now. A lot of people probably just graduated college. You were at Purdue and became an S&C coach there. And why don't you walk us through when you were there learning about strength and speed training at the time, which probably wasn't as prevalent. What did you learn then compared to what you're seeing out there now? What is the biggest difference, and maybe what's some advice you can give some young coaches?
You know, the number one thing I see at the Division I level is you got Division I athletes. If you don't screw them up, you probably did your job. You know, no one's developing speed. We didn't really, even when we were there, we ran sprints, but no one was teaching any of the technical sides of it. We weren't using any of the, at that time, and again, that was the 90s. So, you know, we were using a lot of technology. We just go lift a bunch of heavy stuff and go run a bunch. You know, you're a D1 athlete. We recruited you because you ran a 4.5. You know, if we don't make you slower, you're probably going to be okay. I see the difference between then and now. It's just it's not like people didn't know it then. It's just much more prevalent now that you're looking at, we need to develop speed, you know, and there's a lot more developing speed than just going and putting more weight on the bar and getting a big squat. I see a lot of kids too much time in the gym. They're way too strength focused, and then they lose the ability to move.
Yeah, I mean, that's coming from a strength guy, right? So, I mean, you know, just so everyone knows, when I have questions about strength, the first person who pops in my head is Chad. You know, I want to call him because I think what you do, which is very unique, is you're a strongman, you're a powerlifting guy, but you really understand the importance of the speed part of it. And I think it's hard if you take a lot of S&C coaches out there, they may not think that way, right? Like you said, they're paid to put records up on a board, right? Okay, these kids, they PR'd in the squad or they're dead. And I think that's all great stuff. I think you would agree. But what do you think is the most important thing from strength training that athletes need to focus on? Let's take middle school kids, because I think those are the kids that you get in our facilities right away. We get that 13, 14-year-old, 8th grade freshman. What do you think they need to work on immediately? And then obviously as they move on through high school.
Really, I think force production, it's all about force production. I mean, if you're not putting more force in the ground, you're not going to propel yourself faster. Now, I think subsequently, I think it has to go hand in hand. I think you have to work on movement technique. And then as far as your strength training goes, it should lead to injury resiliency first, then performance. But then when we're looking at strength, the true strength training is like, am I going to go just grunt out 5 reps? Is that what our athletes need? I mean, I think you look at it, and we need to look at strength, speed, and speed strength, and which one does our athlete need at that point? You know, now if I've got a tall, skinny kid, he might need more strength. He might need hypertrophy. So maybe we need a different program for him. But I think for the most part, the kids that we're seeing are just incredibly weak, and they cannot access their nervous system. So I don't need to just go put them on the squat rack and get a big poundage on their back. What I need to do is teach them to put the force in the ground quickly. So we need to focus more on rate of force production and dynamic effort lifting more than we need to work on that absolute strength for young kids. As that goes along, you have to look at what is the need of the athlete. Just had a kid came in, his mom, dad brought him in. He just graduated college. He's a D2 kid. You know, hey, we need you to prep him for his combine. He's got a college combine. Well, they gave me 2 weeks to do it. So what am I going to focus on in 2 weeks? We did all like what his needs at that point were. He was immobile, so we worked a lot of yoga and mobility work in there. His technique was bad, so we worked on that, and then all of his lifting was literally just dynamic effort or rate of force production. We were just getting him to put force in the ground. Now, we did it 2 weeks later. He had a great tryout. He's trained with us for now he's in week 12 of training. You know, that's funny because when he started, he couldn't deadlift 300 pounds for a single. He just pulled 475 in 12 weeks. It wasn't magic. And I was like, you know, and I asked him simply, why do we lift heavy weights? Because I have to be able to put more force in the ground. In that 12 weeks, we've taken 3/10 off of his 40. Okay. I didn't do anything magical. I just made him a little bit stronger. His body composition changed. So he lost 12 pounds of fat while gaining 10 pounds of muscle in 12 weeks. We revamped everything, but really then just taught him what every kid needs: proper movement technique and to get strong in the appropriate manner. He doesn't need to be any bigger. He's actually lost 2 pounds. He was 215 when he started. Now he's 213.
Well, that's probably one of the common themes, right? You get a lot of dads come in maybe with their younger kids who play football, right? We'll take football, for example. They got to put more weight on. They got to be able to squat X amount of weight. And I think the way you describe it, put the appropriate amount of weight, I think that's something that people need to understand as strength coaches. People just look at numbers and they think, well, he lifted 300 pounds, he's going to be good. Well, maybe that wasn't the right weight for him or the right movement pattern for him. But kind of flipping it to the other side, how do you address working with females? You know, I'm a dad of 2 daughters. I have a daughter who's entering high school now, and one of the things we've been working on this summer is we're doing more speed work using a Raptor and doing more technical stuff. But the other thing she needs is strength. She needs to get strong. She's about 100 pounds soaking wet. Pretty quick kid, but I know strength is an issue. How would you address a young girl coming to your facility? Brand new. Most girls, listen, they probably don't lift until they hit high school. What's your approach with someone like that?
The approach would really be, again, number one, I think you have to have adequate screening beforehand. What's going on? How are they moving? Specifically for female athletes, do they have a lot of knee valgus? Do they have weak abductors? So looking at that, and then from there, let's look at how they evaluated. Let's look at their movement. I mean, if I take an athlete, I just did an evaluation last night. The kid starts in acceleration, he stands straight up, and he overstrides. His shin goes vertical, his upper body goes vertical. All the force is going down as opposed to back. So run. There's techniques. We got to look at technique. Then we have to look at, from that athlete, to put more force in the ground. What do we need to do? Number one, we've got to master movement patterns. I'm a huge fan of patterns. If the movement pattern gets better, and stronger, and then we subsequently work on the movement technique, they're going to become faster. For your daughter's sake, she's 100 pounds. Is it going to behoove her to hypertrophy? So how much hypertrophy work does she need? And then the other thing is, how much is she sprinting? I mean, sprinting, what everyone doesn't realize, they think they can just go out and sprint. No, you can't. That's just as metabolic and neurologically taxing as a weight training session. So if you're sprinting 3 times a week, you might not only need to lift once. It just comes down to what's the appropriate volume. And really what you look at, volume, intensity, and frequency. When you look at it, then it comes down to the number one thing is, how do you recover? If I've got an athlete that recovers incredibly fast, I can train more often. If I've got someone who doesn't recover as fast, I've got to pull that back a little bit. So it's kind of a individual basis. What we look for generally for most of our kids is we want to see them run twice a week and lift twice a week. It means I get them into the gym 4 times a week. I think that's, for the average kid, probably plenty, until we start looking at what are their sleep patterns, what are their nutritional status. There's so much other stuff that comes into this that a lot of times strength coaches, either in the private setting or the collegiate setting, don't see. And we've got to look under the hood and understand that. And I think once we do that, it's a lot easier to make the precise exercise prescription that the athlete needs.
Yeah, and I think, when you look at, again, I'll just take girls for example, because they're a little bit different. They're a little bit more unique when you're working with them. Would you, and this is just opinion of mine, but would you prefer to start with them maybe doing unilateral movements over bilateral movements, or a combo of the two, or always go bilateral right away? What are your thoughts on that?
Again, coming back to the evaluation, what do they need? So, I mean,
Yep.
in the perfect world, I think you have to have both. Again, we're looking at movement patterns. So is unilateral better than bilateral? Yes and no. It just depends on the tool. What tool do I need for that athlete? So I think a lot of unilateral training is good. Now, when we're starting out with an athlete, they have relatively no training. Usually what we get is kids coming in that they're total bilateral athletes, so we have to change that immediately to get them doing unilateral motions. Everyone has a bilateral strength deficit, so looking at what is the push. I mean, when she's sprinting, when she's running, does she valgus? What's going on? Once I look at that, then we can make a better determination of what we should be doing. I think a lot of it is just it's so individualized, But if I had to say a blanket exercise prescription when you bring female athletes in, I think building their confidence in their strength is the number one thing we have to do. And that's why I would start with bilateral as the base movement of the beginning of the session, and then move them into a unilateral in the second half of the strength session.
And just to kind of go off that, you brought up a good point. I think it's probably prevalent with even young boys, but especially young girls. They come into your gym. We're Parisi Speed School, so we're going to work on speed. They may not realize strength is going to be a part of it, right? Some parents don't think that's what it is. And you probably get that whoa, I don't want my daughter lifting weights, or I don't want my son lifting weights. It could stunt their growth. All the things that we've heard a million times. What are some of the things that you say to address that? I mean, I know you do a great job of it. Maybe share with everyone else.
Well, I think a lot of it, like especially prepubescence, like parents like you can't lift weights. I'm like, You put your kid in soccer. Hello. I mean, they're running, they're sprinting, they're cutting. I mean, the shearing forces they're doing from the sport itself, or they're in gymnastics or whatever the sport is, those are detrimental, but you're not going to knock that. So I look at, I mean, there's been close to 200 studies on prepubescent children strength training, as long as it's A, supervised, B, appropriate technique, and C, appropriate load. Well, I can take a 7-year-old, and if he can adequately squat or do an air squat properly, can I load him? Well, I hand him a 2-pound plate. Well, that's a load. I'm loading a child. That's not bad, because you know what? I've raised 2 boys. They trust me. They're boys or girls, regardless. I mean, my daughter wasn't as bad as my boys, but they would climb on a counter and jump off it 15 times. What's more detrimental, them doing a squat loaded with a 5-pound plate, or them jumping off? You know, and then back to girls. And if we look at the female athlete, just the way just the way God built our bodies, especially the female body and the Q angle. I think it's more important that girls strength train than boys. You know, we look at from an injury standpoint. I mean, in the last decade, we've had a 400% increase in ACL tears. Why? Girls aren't as strong. Now, I went through this when my daughter was in high school, you know, and I was like, you know, we need to get these girls in the weight room. Like, no, girls don't need to lift weights. They're going to look manly. I'm like, it doesn't happen that way. You know, now if they were genetically gifted with a proper hormone profile, maybe they'll put on muscle a lot faster than the next person. But, you know, increasing strength for the female athlete decreases the potential for injury. Number one, increases their performance. But I think the biggest thing that I'm looking at with all of our female athletes is just the confidence. Man, you get a girl doing a chin-up, you get a girl hitting a deadlift, you get a girl doing a squat, and they're like, man, I'm tough. You know, I can do it. And then it transfers over. It starts to change who they are. They start to come out and they start to perform better because of the confidence they have, because they've mastered those skills themselves. It makes them, and then as they get stronger, they're just putting more force around and they're moving faster.
Well, I think confidence is a big issue, right? I mean, look at all the kids that we've dealt with over the years. We've dealt with a ton of kids with confidence issues, but even now in this time, right? You know, your state's different than where I am, but look at what some of these kids are going through. You know, a lot of them lost their spring sports season. Fall sports are in question right now in a lot of areas. So, how important do you think it is now, even for people to work with people like us, to hopefully maintain keeping their confidence up? Because I can see it. You know, I've seen it with my own child. I've seen it with some of her friends, where you can tell they're a little down. They're a little down from not playing as much. So, you know, how do you address that within the sessions? Because I know some kids are a little afraid of weight training the first time, and then they walk into a gym, weights are slamming, the music's blasting. You know, how do you talk to them? What are some of the things that you do to kind of make them feel comfortable?
You know, sorry, I'm dropping my phone. I'm trying to keep the charger on. You know, we just explain to them what they're doing, why we're strength training, why are we going to do these movements, and how to do these movements. And, you know, I think when you explain, kids are intelligent. I mean, we can start learning a foreign language at 5 or 6 years old. You know, they're incredibly intelligent. They will absorb the information. I think you just explain to them why we're doing it, and then to make them feel safe. You know, I think a lot of coaches want to put weight on the kid's back or on their hands before they need it. Master the movement pattern. Just master the movement pattern. The strength will come. It's just like speed. It's like, I'd rather you go out and do the drill slow and right. The speed will come. The same with strength. If you learn the technique first, we can load it over time. But again, we live in this popcorn society that we want it right now. We can't have it right now. Strength takes time. You know, it's the hardest thing to gain, you know, and unfortunately, it's probably one of the easier things to lose when you quit training, you know. So it's like, I think once we just go slowly and then build on it, they become more confident in their ability to do the movement pattern. And then they'll start to ask to do more weight. They'll want to push it. And I think that's the, you know, it just comes back to the really simple things, like master the little stuff first. I mean, there's nothing sexy about acceleration or change direction or top speed. There's nothing sexy about strength training. It's like, master the movement, put a little bit more iron on the bar if you're in the weight room, and just do it consistently over time. Everyone wants it right now. I can't get your kid prepped for 3 weeks for their combine. You know, I can't put 30 pounds on your kid's body weight over a summer.
No, listen, we're in an instant society, right? Instagram, everything is instant, and people want that. But we're in a little bit of a different time right now. Oh, did he just jump off? Oh, there you
go. Sorry.
All good. We're in a little different time right now because, again, seasons are getting shifted all over the place. We had a question coming from our buddy Casey Lee. How would you manage or modify training volume for athlete seasons when it was canceled? So let's just take, for example, in certain states, I think Delaware just did it. They canceled their football season. How would you handle those kids that maybe you've been working with since June to July, and they're going to go all the way through their fall season? How would you manage the volume? I mean, in a good way, I think it's a good problem to have because you get to train them longer, but how would you also keep them motivated through that?
The thing is, like, here's the reality, gang. This is where season's at. This is what we're living through. So now maybe it would be easy. Hey, let's take a week off, take some downtime, and then let's restart the training cycle. And then how much time do we have? And really, it comes down to time. I mean, I look at, in a perfect world, I would see a kid 50 weeks out of the year. I'd have them 50 weeks out of the year. So then we would train that. Now, I look at what's the volume. Well, now we're back into off season. We were trying to peak, but now we're back to an off season. So where do we start? Do we go back? I mean, if you're looking at, I'm not a linear periodization guy. I'm more of a conjugate periodization guy, where I look at, we should be training dynamic effort year round. We should be training max effort year round. Now, depending on where we're at season wise, then I would adjust that effort. Maybe we would go back now, depending on the athlete, that we would go back now and do some more hypertrophy work because we are back in the off season. If that athlete needs it, if the athlete needs more force, maybe we need to put more time into that. So I think it's dependent upon the athlete. Now, if you've got an overall program that you got 60 kids and we got to run them through a program, that's all we can do. Then you've got to make what does the team need? I always look at what's the team need. If the team needs to be faster, we need to get more force put in the ground. So now we've got an adequate amount of time to teach Olympic movements. So maybe we should go into really working on the technical aspects of cleans and snatches, and then blending that in with non-terminal end speed movements. I'm a huge fan of, snatch or clean, and then immediately go into a rate of force production where we're jumping, throwing, exploding through the full range of motion. The problem with any strength movement is there's a terminal end to every strength movement, so the bar speed has to slow. I think when we take that out, and then blend that with a jump, a throw, you start to get you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and also taking from what you're doing in the weight room, and like you're saying, moving it out to the turf or track or whatever. I think one of the biggest things that you and I've spoken about over the years is how do we take what we're doing in the weight room and get it to transfer right to the field? And one of the things I know you've been using for the past couple of years is you've worked with the VertiMax Raptor, and obviously using all our Parisi speed drills and techniques. How have you kind of meshed that as part of your training program? So obviously the kids are going to lift in a perfect week, right? They might lift 2 days a week with you, 2 or 3, and then they might run 2 or 3. What are some of the things that you've seen beneficial by using, say, use like the Raptor, using other devices to overload them and get that transfer? I think the word I like to use is transfer, but let me know your thoughts on that.
I've been doing a lot more with really in the weight room during our dynamic effort days, where we will do a myriad, like 3 consecutive movements. So like a dynamic effort squat into a jump, right into a sprint. So we're putting it all to use at the same time. Subsequently, out on the when we go run to the turf or the court, and we're using resisted sprinting or the Raptors or the VertiMax to do extra work. The biggest thing is I think the hardest for most people is not doing too much. You get in there, it's like you run the shit out of the kids, and you can't do that because there's only so much recovery. So it's finding that fine line of volume, intensity, and frequency. So if we have a dynamic lift on Monday, and then let's say, I always prefer that the kids come in and do their sprint work. A lot of times we'll blend kids training together. I want to do their sprint work first when they're fresh, because it's so neural, it's so learning dependent. Lifting is not as hard as the sprinting, in my opinion. I do believe that once we go to the weight room, if we're doing weight room first, then we've got to look at those the Olympic movements. Do those first. Get that explosive. And your squats can come later, but you got to do your dynamic stuff and your rate of force production stuff up front. Flipping that again, like I said, it's that fine line. It's the fine line between pushing them and then overtraining them or overreaching them, and that's why when you're out on the turf, how many raptor sprints do I need? How many resistance sprints, viper cord sprints do I need? How much overspeed training do I need? How many times do I need to go to the force treadmill and hit that? Or, it's top speed day. How many longer sprints are we going to run on the curve? It's just a fine line of are they progressing? And I think that's where you have to adequately check them over a few. I try to recheck a 10 or a 20 or something every couple of weeks. Are we making improvements? Reshoot videos. Take a look at the athlete that we trained. We've been training for 3 months. Here was his running technique 3 months ago. Now here's a month ago. Now what does it look like today? I think when you start looking at that, that's how you start to look over time and start to see more effective training.
Yeah, and then speaking about recovery, obviously I think it's one of the things that kids have a difficult time with. You have parents who think the kids have to work out every day, or they got to go for extra trainings and things like that. One of the things I was thinking about before this interview with you is when you did all your strongman work, and I know you still do strongman work, what did you learn from all of that training and recovery, and how have maybe you have applied that to work with some of your athletes? Although it's different, but I'm sure you probably learned some things over the years.
Well, I still did a lot of speed and agility stuff because you know what? I'm always, everyone laughs at me. I'm 265 pounds. I'm always the smallest guy on the field. So I relied a lot upon my athleticism. Now, as I've gotten older, I'm slower. I can't do the stuff I used to do, but I still build that into my training for one simple reason. It's being athletic. The more athletic you are, the old saying, speed kills. I'm a strong man, but if you want to win in events, the guy who does it the fastest that generally wins. So I'm always trying to be cognizant of that, and I just keep, I think it's, for me, I do a lot of data checks. So I'll actually grab, I've got a blood pressure cuff. So I'll check my blood pressure in the morning and then my heart rate and start to see and just chart that where that's at. So I think when my volume goes up. Now, a lot of kids aren't going to have that option. But I think as far as coaching goes, you see your kids on a day-to-day basis. Are they crisp? Are they popping? Are they moving well? If they're not moving well, why is it? And then the kids, they got these damn cell phones. So they're Snapchatting until 2 a.m. They came in with 4.5 hours of sleep. They didn't eat. You have to start to manage that. And then we have to talk to the kids about that and what they have to manage. I've got a lot of my college kids that it was their last weekend. They're going to campus. So it's like, we were staying out late doing stuff we shouldn't have been doing. That's why their workouts, these last 2 or 3 workouts, have suffered. They know that, but it's like, as your coach, you just got to keep hammering that down. Mm-hmm. I just do a lot of recovery work. So I'll come in and just spin on the bike and then I'll foam roll out. I got a power plate, so I'll hit the power plate. I do a lot of flossing. I do everything I can to try to stay healthy. And again, it just comes down to how much time you have. If you've got time, use it. If you don't, then from a hierarchy of needs, what do you hit? You have to come in, and that's why we front load so much mobility work in the beginning of the workout. And I build in a lot of correctives. So we're doing tons of correctives throughout the workout in our strength. So I think that's helped for longevity, but I think you just have to manage. You got to manage the stress. You just got to manage the stress. And that's what I try to do, is manage the stress. Number one thing most of these kids need: Coach, what supplement do I need? You don't. You need water and food and air and sleep. If you're not sleeping 8 hours a day, if you're not drinking a gallon of water a day, if you're not eating 3 or 4 meals a day of real food with a fork and a knife, we need to address that stuff. You don't need supplements. You don't need magical pills or powders, and there's no magical program. The person who consistently applies the basics over a long period of time is going to be successful. And I think that's what all these kids want. They want these magical pills. They want magical workouts. They want the newest, latest, greatest. I think it's all cool, but you got to just manage the little things, manage the stress, manage the recovery, and that all comes back for most of those kids. Are they sleeping enough? Are they eating enough? Are they drinking enough fluid?
Yeah, I think, listen, there are a million different ways to recover these days. Obviously, there's tons of mobility devices out there now. You're lucky enough to have a power plate, foam rolling, flossing, things like that. I just had a question pop up, and I'm actually not as familiar with this, so maybe you know about this. We had Mark ask, he has athletes using what's called WHOOP, WHOOP, to manage stress and recovery. Do you know anything about that? Have you ever heard that before?
I've never heard of it, but hey, that's the beauty. You and I just heard something new, so
Yeah.
I'm going to go research that
Yeah,
when I get off.
we both don't know what that is. But so, Mark, if you can kind of give us a little feedback before we hop off on what that is. I think one of the things I know you and I do, we work with Train Heroic, and part of that, every time the kids log in, is they have to do a quick little survey. What's their stress level like? What's their sleep pattern? Things like that. So I think it's important to do that for the kids. Is that something that you do, and is it more just casual? Like, I know me, it's every day. It's how are you feeling? What did you do yesterday? Because sometimes that'll give you pretty much a quick indication of where they're at.
You just got to ask those questions and not be shocked when you actually get the answers. Coach, I slept in until 3. I had one meal. I played video games. It's every day. I think you just have to manage it on a day-to-day basis, simply because, they're kids. They're kids. Hell, it's bad enough when they're adults. They know what they should be doing. The kids don't always know what they should be doing. But you start to we educate on why to eat, why to sleep, why all that has to happen. If you want to be optimal, you've got to put what you're putting in, how you're recovering, how you're eating, how you're resting, and the stuff you're doing on your days off. Those are all important. And I think once you make kids understand that, they become more successful, more accountable to themselves.
Yeah, and I think right now, we're dealing with stress with all the kids. We know that this uncertainty over the next probably up to a year right now with sports is probably out there. We don't know, and they're going to be dealing with stress and adversity. You're someone who has competed at the highest level in your sport and done very well, obviously. How did you, number one, deal with that stress? And let's even take it a step further. I'm sure there was a time, or maybe multiple times, that you dealt with some tough adversity. I know you've battled through injuries over your career, which is a little different from what we're dealing with now. But what advice would you give to a lot of athletes out there that are going to be dealing with this adversity for, or who knows, over the next 3, 6, 9 months? What are some of the things that you did to keep?
I was instilled very early on that you never quit, you never give up. Regardless if you've got an injury, you can train around it. Some people get injured and they quit working out. They quit doing the stuff they love. At closing in on 52, I'm looking. I just found out that Worlds is going to be canceled this year. So it's like, oh man, I've been training for that for the last 6 months. What do I do? Well, you know what? Guess what? That's life. That's life now. So I just look at injuries or setbacks. That's part of it. And if you can't deal with it in this microcosm of training or your sport, then you're not going to handle it with life. And I've lost my grandparents. I've lost my mom. If you can't deal with losing a season of sports, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't mean a whole lot, you're not going to handle losing your closest loved ones. Unfortunately, I've had to deal with that since I'm a very young age. And I just looked at it like, this is all part of it. So if I know this pandemic is stressful, I'm not going to play my season. We trained an entire soccer team. They were in the best shape of their life. We're going to win a state championship. My girls' basketball team went to the state championship, made it to the Final Four, and the game was canceled. How heartbreaking is that? But and then our soccer kids, and now it's like, what are we going to do for fall? It might not even be a fall season, but it's like, so you retool, you take what you learn from that lesson, and then you get better. Just like our business. We were shut down for 2 months. That's $22,000 of money going out with nothing coming in. What was your response? I came back in May, June, and July, and we had record months. Now we're going to expand. I'm going to expand. Why? Because you know what? I'm not going to cower in the defensive position. I'm going to go on attack mode in offensive position and expand what we offer. And I think that's what these kids got to do. It's now you've got a longer off season. Let's go get bigger. Let's go make bigger improvements. Let's get stronger. Let's get faster. Let's get less resilient to injury. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to stay positive in this negative time. You can't just look at, oh yeah, I lost my season. Well, what was that opportunity? The opportunity there is you can get better for the spring season, because we're going to move the spring. So I hate to say it, but all my football kids, not one of them is going to play football this fall, because NAIA and NCAA are gone. Now, I predict that in the next couple of days, the Big Ten will follow the MAC, and then the ACC, then the Big 12. Maybe, who knows? Maybe even the SEC will jump out and go to spring. Who knows?
No, I know reports are coming out today. It's not looking good for those, but I think the main thing is, like you said, we have to be strong, and it's difficult. But I think Our job as coaches is to help these kids. And if you look at it, they may not be with their school coaches now, right? That season may not happen. So they might be working with private coaches like ourselves. I'm also a strength coach at high school, so I'm anticipating doing some different stuff this year. We're not sure what we're going to do this year as far as the season goes. I hope we have one. I really do. I want the kids to have it. But like you said, we have to find perspective, I think. And I think sometimes that's difficult for people to do. But I'll tell you one thing. I just got fired up there. I wanted to run through a wall for you. But I think that's what you do so great is you just get people fired up and believe in them in themselves. And, when someone like with your background can talk to a kid and say you believe in them, then I've seen you do it a million times. I think that's so important. And if anyone can get something out of listening to Chad, listen, he is a genius when it comes to strength. So you can hit him up, ask him strength questions, but he knows how to work with kids and get in their heads and get them to believe in themselves. And at the end of the day, I think that's one of the most valuable attributes a coach can have. So that's one of the compliments I always wanted to share with you and how good you are at that.
Thanks, Coach. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it is the number one attribute a coach needs to have, is because, you know what, if you look at what are we coaching for? What's the big picture? Making a kid faster, making a kid stronger, less. No, we're impacting their life forever. That's what we do. We don't just, making a kid faster. We're at the Parisi Speed School or we're VertiMax. We're making kids faster. We're making kids less likely to get hurt. Those are all cool things. But what we're instilling in them is the self-confidence and self-esteem that will allow to empower them to do whatever they want to be. And you know what? Most of them aren't going to be professional athletes. And if they are professional athletes, their careers won't last very long. I think it's the most important thing we can do is to inspire kids that they can do anything they want, that there's nothing they can't do as long as they understand that they got to work their butts off for it, and just master the basics. So many people don't want to master the basics. They don't want to be. Long-term success comes by mastering the little things and doing them, incredibly well all the time. And I think that's if we can draw that out of our kids, that they understand. It's just, hey, show up, be respectful, be coachable, be known for your work ethic, and always give your best effort. If those kids do those 4 pillars for me, I'm so tickled pink, because you know what? In 10 years, maybe their athletic career is over, but I know they're going to be successful people in our society and contributing and making a difference. And that's our end goal, is to always to make a difference in our athlete's life.
I agree. I couldn't say it any better myself. And I think the word I would summarize that with is consistency. And I think consistency is not that big right now, right? Social media is big and people want to see the cool workouts, and I get all that. I think it's an important thing, but I think, you're preaching the basics, and I think we need more strength coaches out there. Whoever's listening to this live cast or the podcast when this comes out, you need to master the basics and push that on the kids and get the kids to understand it. And I know you're dealing with not only the pressures of social media, but you're probably dealing with the pressures of whether it be parents, coaches, whoever. So I just think it's something that people just need to constantly hear. Well, I thank you so much for getting on a call with us. I mean, you and I could talk for about another 5 hours when it comes to strength training. But I know we've popped up, your Instagram here, Chad Coy 55. So hopefully people will hit you up. And listen, let him share some knowledge with you guys, because over 30 years of training, he's probably been alive. Been training more than some of you trainers out there have been working. So he's got a lot of knowledge to share. And anytime you guys want to reach out, I'm telling you, Chad will get back to you. But any parting thoughts before we hop off this call?
That was my personal one. Just go to our Parisi Speed School of Como page, and it's just Parisi Speed School Como. We put a lot of stuff on there. And honestly, guys, that's one of the things that I think that as a master coach with Parisi that I try to do for the network or anybody, it's like, pick up the phone, drop an email. I don't know a coach alive that wouldn't stop. If you've got a valid question, it wouldn't stop and help you. Now if you're going to pick my brain, you want to pick my brains for 5 hours, that's a different story. But you shoot me something, that's what we're here for. We're here. That's how we make this better. And at the end of the day, to win this war that I think we're in, because, we look at it, $500 billion we spent this year on fighting the war on obesity. And we start looking at our kids and the obesity rate of children is rising. And in our country, and it's us one coach at a time, one kid at a time, so if you've got a question, hit me up. I want to be able to help. I want to make this a better place. And I think the number one thing we can do as coaches is just make our little niche of the world better today. And if we get more people doing the same thing on that same mission, that big wagon will get moving faster, and we can turn the tide on the disease of obesity. Which, again, here's me. That's what's causing such a problem here with this pandemic. 40% of our population is obese, 60% is overweight, and those are the people that are falling. You look at the countries in the world that are not obese, that are healthy, they're doing a lot better with this. I think if we were healthier, we'd be doing a lot better. And I think that's why it's so important that we not only teach performance, but teach these kids health for the long run, because they're going to be adults before we know it. And if we can keep them healthy, then we'll have a more healthy nation.
I agree 100%. I think, that could be another call talking about that. But I think we're kind of running out of time here. So I wanted to, again, thank you so much. Not only is this a professional relationship, it's a personal relationship. And I thank you for getting on for me. And I know VertiMax appreciates it. And I know we'll definitely do this again in the future.
Thank you.